Day, and the Aggies and Texas have their annual battle, this time on Kyle Field in College Station, as these two old rivals jockey for position.
Want to throw again, going down into the end zone. It's Bumgarner! It's a touchdown! In the end zone, a yard deep on the far side of the field. And they're coming up the middle. He's been stripped of the ball. Who got it? Aggies got the ball! Aggies got the ball!
The Aggies are not to be denied on this day.
He did not make it. Simmons did not make it. The Aggies hold at 4th and goal at the 1-yard line.
Touchdown, Rodney Thomas. Aaron Glenn into the end zone. Touchdown. Slot to the left. No tight end. Shea Holder is exposed here on this right side. Put a man in motion. Now they snap it. Going to throw here to Parker at the 20, at the 15, at the 10, at the 5. He is almost. He got a touchdown! He got a touchdown! He got a touchdown!
The Big 12 championship game was just something for just that's a story I'll tell my kids. That's a story I'll tell my grandkids, and I'm sure the story will get more inflated every year.
That was so meaningful to me because in '97 we'd won the Big 12 South Championship, and we played a great Nebraska team in San Antonio in the game, and they beat us pretty convincingly. The next year we came back and we played Nebraska on Kyle Field. They were ranked number 2 in the nation, and we beat them. And later in the year, then we played Kansas State, who was number 1 at the time in one poll and number 2 in the other. And we played them and beat them in St. Louis in a northern stadium and beat them for the championship. That was a special year for I think all the guys involved in our football program.
Texas A&M's 1998 Big 12 Conference football title further established the Aggies' winning tradition on the gridiron. For over 100 years, walking hand in hand with that success has been the support of perhaps the greatest fan base in all of college football. The passion that A&M fans, known as the 12th man, exhibit towards their team is unmatched by most schools, and was most on display annually around Thanksgiving, when each year before the Aggies' rivalry game with the Texas Longhorns, the bonfire was lit. The event, by 1998, had turned into an Aggie rite of passage.
To be there and just the sea of people as far as you could see, and of course the great guys, Dat and Dan got up there and gave their speeches, and the band played, and it was just an awesome experience. And then of course lighting it was truly memorable.
It's really just hard to describe. If you can imagine the atmosphere of a football game in the sense of 50, 60, 70,000 people all coming together, and typically on a Thanksgiving night, just coming out to the field and taking part in this. I mean, it's really undescribable.
Being in Bonfire, it was something, you always looked up there on the scaffolding. There was always the seniors, and they had their turn. You're like, man, that was always something that you look forward to, as far as getting your time to be up there. But it was always a great time. It was something that was just nothing in the country. There's nothing else like it.
A towering stack of logs, set ablaze in the cold night air, had become a symbol of the undying love Aggies have for their school. On November 25th, 1998, it burned for the 89th time. It was set to burn again 365 days later, on November 25th of 1999.
You look forward to your night to get a chance to do that as a senior, to be the ones on stage, and you never would have thought that there's in any way that this would ever stop.
It was something to look forward to each and every year, whether you were a student or not a student.
It's just like all the other traditions at A&M. You expect them to live and go with the school as the school grows and goes on. So you expect them to be going on forever.
Good evening. This was to have been a big Thanksgiving week at Texas A&M, home of the Aggies and a storied football tradition. But tonight, Texas is in mourning. In College Station, a huge pile of logs set up for the traditional bonfire collapsed.
Students at A&M injured when the bonfire collapsed this morning.
And they build and burn a mammoth bonfire every year for the game against the University of Texas. Tonight, they are still picking an enormous pile of logs apart.
The first information I had was a call from Dave South at about 5:30 in the morning and told me that there'd been a terrible accident and the bonfire had fallen. There were some fatalities and they didn't know to what extent.
Randy woke me up that morning and he said, stack collapsed. 4 people are dead so far as people are trapped down there. I remember having a nauseous feeling in my stomach.
I was listening to the radio, and Sally and I have 4 children. And when I first heard that there were some kids that were dead, and there were some kids that were missing, and there were a lot of kids that needed blood and were injured, it just caught me as a father. And then I heard, you need to call this number immediately to check with your children to make sure they're safe. And then I heard the number is overloaded, the lines are overloaded, you can't get through. And I thought, as a father, I actually pulled off the road and sat down and took a deep breath and started crying.
I know push is going on, so I drive down University because, it's almost 2 in the morning. The lights are on. Students are out there working. So I drove down University, saw Stack, made the right on Texas, and unfortunately, that was the last time I saw the Stack standing.
I was woken up by my mother early that morning. She called and was frantic. Of course, she thought that her son, who's at Texas A&M, might have been out at the bonfire that morning. But when she said the logs fell, of course, the first thing that happened, it went through my mind was, geez, I wonder how fast we'll be able to get it back up, because I'm sure we will. It wasn't until I got to the field house later that morning that I realized how severe it really was, and it scared the hell out of me. Scared the hell out of me.
Wake up the next morning, turn on the TV, and KBTX, the local news, is running the story, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, what I was hearing.
At 2:42 a.m., bonfire collapsed, turning tradition into tragedy. November 18th, it turned into the most difficult day in the 123-year history of the university. Chip Teal, an Aggie student from Livingston, Texas, was at the peak of the stack looking back towards the expansive A&M campus when disaster struck. He was one of 27 injured.
60 feet up in the air on a crisp, clean, calm night, was a looking back pretty humbling experience. And then while we were up there, something rumbled, and next thing I know, bonfire was falling. We felt it shake. I knew bonfire wouldn't shake like that because I built it and I've been on top of it, hundreds of times. And when it shook, and then there was almost like a pause, which seemed like eternity. And then it started to fall, and for some reason I actually jumped off the backside. So it fell to the east and I jumped to the west. On my way down, I grabbed hold of a rope, hurt my shoulder, and then at some point I just fell and tumbled in.
Lieutenant Colonel Jay Brewer, a former student of Texas A&M, helped build the bonfire in the late 70s and early 80s. He is now the Senior Associate Director of the Fightin' Texas Aggie Band. He received the call around 3 a.m.
He said, "Sir, I just want to let you know the stack fell, but we think we have everybody accounted for." And I thanked him for calling and hung the phone up and laid down in bed. And about 3 to 5 minutes later, I sat up and I thought, oh my God, he thinks he has everybody accounted for. I got my pickup and drove to work and drove in the main gate. And I knew that this was a bad scene. You're kind of in a state of shock. It wasn't long after I arrived and I found that I was totally useless to help that I went to the dorm, and on that particular morning they had already pulled everyone out of the core dorms and had a standing formation and took roll A to Z to find out who they had and who they didn't have.
Rescue workers were immediately called to the scene. One of them was Dr. G. Kimball Bennett. He founded the elite urban search and rescue team Texas Task Force 1, headquartered in College Station. In later years, this group would deploy to sites such as the World Trade Center and to locations where Hurricanes Katrina and Rita ravaged the Gulf Coast. This event, however, struck close to home.
My first reaction was one of, is there anybody else in there? I could see they were getting people out over where a lot of the logs had fallen. It was not chaos at all out there. It was organized. It was people trying to help people. Physicians were there, healthcare people on the scene, ambulances were there. Everybody's going 100 miles an hour to get the job done, but heads are calm and cool. Everyone on that scene, in their own way, was a hero trying to do their best to relieve any pain and suffering. The other thing that impacted me greatly was the students that were around there. They were all together, linked together. They were all in prayer. They were, you could feel it. You could feel the energy coming from them and the support.
When day finally broke on the 18th, the campus was in disbelief. As the search for life under the stack continued, Aggies were left looking for answers. Meanwhile, on the opposite corner of campus, the football team met. Practice was scheduled in preparation for the game against Texas.
It wasn't a coach's team meeting, it was more of a players' team meeting. At that point, we all sat in there and talked about the events and what we thought it would be best to do for us and for the university and for everybody out there. And we decided that we were going to skip practice that day and go over and try to do whatever we could to help.
It's funny, but we didn't even wait to check with the coaches. We just went over there and, it's like we knew it was the right thing to do.
At first, no, it was not a situation where like, hey, let's meet up, we're going to go move logs. It just kind of grew into that. And then it was just, hey, got a truck, go get it, we're going to hop in back, let's go. No coach had any clue of what we were doing, and it was brought up to Coach Slocum. At that point, what are you going to do? He didn't have any players there to run practice.
We had some big, strong guys out there hauling logs, and they felt, I think that was therapy for them in a way that it number one, brought our student body very close together. But the players were out there doing their parts, and I think it gave them some consolation to know they were in a very small way helping with the process.
What the football team did that day was not just a symbolic act of showing up and supporting the A&M student body in its biggest time of need. What they did really helped that effort that day. I remember a student told me, who was helping a Corps Cadet student, told me, he said, what takes 50 of us only took 15 of them, because these guys were picking up these logs and moving them away from the stack and really, really helping out the effort.
It was good for the workers out there to see everybody pitching in, and I think it was good for the people to see they could do something. They could help.
Coach R.C. Slocum, as his players assisted with rescue efforts, was asked to help with another important decision.
It was a legitimate question of, do you play the game? And that was something that really had to be considered, and felt like I had a good feel for what our team felt and what the coaches felt and what I felt personally.
We called RC and said, help us. We're the outsiders here. We don't want to try to look like we're upstaging anything, but we want to help. So you tell us what to do and we'll do it. Anything you want, we'll do. We'll cancel the game. We will not have our Helks rally. Just tell us. We don't know what's appropriate.
It was Thanksgiving weekend. All these kids here, the students on campus, were shattered. And to send them all away from here would not be a good thing. So my recommendation to Dr. Bowen was that we play the game. And all of us just get closer to each other instead of spreading out.
The game would go on, but was still very much an afterthought. Lives have been lost, and others were hanging in the balance. The football team pressed on, continuing to move the massive logs in hopes of freeing one of their fellow Aggies.
That day was really a day that we all grew up. That day is certainly a day that we realize that we're not invincible. And we're just a bunch of kids that think life is perfect and easy, and we realize that day it's not. And I think physically we just checked out. We didn't even realize how hard physically the work we had been through was. And it wasn't until we kind of all sat back and they said, okay, listen, stop getting in there, it's too unsafe, that we looked at our arms and we were just scratched and bloodied up and covered in dirt and completely exhausted. And it still didn't matter, because we're sitting there thinking there are kids in there that are dead. And everything changed.
As work and the hope of saving lives moved towards the afternoon on the Texas A&M campus, the rivals in Austin, some 90 miles away, shared the same hope and the same grief, all the while asking how they could assist.
When I got here, I got with Coach Brown, and Coach Brown was looking to find what we could do. We knew what they had to be going through because we all actually are in the same business. We're in the kid business, and when you start losing students like that, it touches everybody. And that's when Sally Brown came up with the idea of us doing a blood drive. Because that's the other thing they said, we need blood, we have a shortage. And it was the most amazing thing that afternoon. She called the Red Cross. We got a blood drive set up here in the office.
We all see that a lot of people are suffering and in pain, and we just, if there's any one small thing that we can do, we all want to do it.
And there were so many people, players, A&M fans, Tech fans, Baylor fans, Texas fans. They were all over the place, and you could see it just broke down all the barriers of rivalry. And it was about what was good, and it was about what was helping.
The A&M Texas rivalry has always been different than most. While each school wants deeply to beat the other, there was a certain respect that came with being the two most recognized institutions in one of the largest states in the country. Although for years it took some time for that respect to show. Texas A&M today is one of the largest schools in the nation with almost 50,000 students. But until the 60s, when women were first admitted, A&M wasn't near its current size. The rivalry was what the Aggies turned to.
It was everything. When I came here, there weren't any women on campus. We had campus theater. We had Guyan Hall, and we had a couple of theaters downtown. There wasn't a lot to do. And so as a result, we focused our energies on beating the hell out of TU and everybody else in sports. But I remember the Texas A&M Texas rivalries, the games, the core trips to Austin. It was really big time. Basketball, we'd go over to Gregory Gym, and we couldn't get out of there without a fight or something because the rivalry was so intense.
With the A&M campus growing in size, students, and activities by the decade, focus could be spread to numerous events. The football rivalry's intensity may have faded, while its competitiveness was fast rising. The Longhorns had controlled the series since its beginning in 1894, much of the reason being the Aggies only were victorious in one of the first 17 meetings. But in 1975, A&M head coach Emory Ballard, a former UT assistant, used his wishbone offense to bring A&M to prominence. On Thanksgiving of that year, the two teams met at Kyle Field, both ranked in the top 5. The Aggies won 20-10, and may have, on that day, changed the rivalry. When Jackie Sherrill was hired to take over the Aggie program from Pittsburgh in 1982, he began to assert A&M dominance on the series, winning 5 in a row from 1984 to 88.
What I noticed more than anything
is when you'd go into Houston, you'd see a lot of emblems in the back of the cars. During that period of time, you saw a lot of Aggie emblems and not that many University of Texas emblems. So yes, I mean, it means a lot, but if you were a young kid in grade school, you went all the way through and never saw Texas A&M lose to Texas.
By the time 1999 arrived, A&M had won 15 of the most recent 24 meetings against the Horns. Each school knew by then the other would always be there. And the debate raged on of who was the best in Texas.
I think the Texas A&M rivalry has always been a rivalry of respect. People of the two schools go together and build the state of Texas after they get through arguing about the football game. I thought it was the best rivalry I had ever been involved with, even in '98, because there were families affected on both sides. And you would see a husband from Texas and a wife from A&M, or vice versa, or a granddad, and they may have just mixed family that said they don't speak at Thanksgiving, but it was very respectful.
It was always special, and over the years recruiting, I would tell young men, and it wasn't recruiting talk, it's something I really believed. And I said, I don't know how any young man that grows up in this state that has a chance to play in that game on Thanksgiving weekend, matching these two big universities here in the great state of Texas. I don't know how you could go somewhere else. That's special.
And each year before this rivalry football game, the Bonfire signaled the Aggies' burning desire to beat the University of Texas. But to the 12th man, this event was much more than a mere pep rally before a rivalry game.
To me, the most important aspect of Aggie Bonfire was building it, not burning it.
You're talking about thousands of hours, the loading, you know, the stacking, then the push, and then the final touch, the final two stacks. And then the burning, you're talking about approximately 2 months there of student time.
Core, non-reg, on campus, off campus, didn't matter. You had a seat at the table at Bonfire, and you were welcome to come there, work on it.
The building of the bonfire, the experience of working together, being sweaty and tired and muddy, etc., and having a team, taking care of your buddy taking care of you.
We came together with all of these individuals with lots of different backgrounds. We met lots of people we never would have had a chance to meet while we were here.
There was nothing else like Bonfire. And I think from the first time I got here, it was one of those things that whenever you started to put A&M in any kind of a box, it was the one thing that you could put on top of the box because there was nothing else like it.
Bonfire was a tradition that touched thousands of Aggies, and the stories that went along with it were told from generation to generation. Some about an Aggie's first experience with the event.
I was in junior high school, and this would have been about 1958. The bonfire was over by Duncan Hall on that field out there, and it was a special deal. I'd never seen anything like it.
That was one of the biggest activities that we had during the time I was here, where outside the ranks of the band we got to do things with other people, to include football players, to include football coaches. I remember Coach Sherrill being up on the stack wiring logs on the bonfire.
The first year past the bonfire, going home every night, and you know, I'd see kids out there working, so I just stopped one night. Then all of a sudden, going from stopping to being on the 4-stack wiring, and then maybe going home around 4 o'clock in the morning. Then I would stop every night.
Some of the old stories about the stack's construction process have lived for decades. How much those tales have been embellished may never be known.
In some records, there's accounts of a couple of, in the 30s and 40s, a couple of Texas students supposedly rented airplanes and tried to fly over here. I don't remember any bombs being thrown into the history, but apparently some planes thought about it, and one plane ran out of gas, according to history, and landed at Easterwood, and the Aggies went and got the plane and used the plane for part of the bonfire. really until the 60s. The outhouse was obtained by various means, primarily by finding one someplace and, shall we say, acquiring it without an invoice. And so this happened in the 50s. Aggies wanted to find the outhouse. Of course, we always put it on top of the bonfire as a last gesture. And so they saw one out into pasture about 100 yards from an old farmhouse. So these guys had to pick up and come along with a cable, a winch line. And they went up and roped the outhouse and took off across the field, the outhouse just a-bouncing. They were going to load it up when they got out to the street, and they heard some screaming and yelling going on. They stopped the truck, went over and opened the door, and there was an 88-year-old man in there with his pants down. I mean, he was angry. He was really hostile.
And so many simply have their own stories of Aggie Bonfire, ones that will stay with them forever.
One of the kids we picked up on our shoulders my senior year, and his mom and dad always come tell me that now, that I remember picking him up and letting him sit up and watch the bonfire with us.
I remember my senior year, fall of 1980, when the bonfire was burning, and that particular evening it snowed. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But what I remember most are the names and the faces and the old dirty clothes and the red pots and the green pots and the white pots and the yellow pots and the brown, and all this stuff. And the fact that that was our bonfire. That was our tradition.
At Reed Arena, on that sorrowful night, Aggies gathered to pay respects to their 12. A UT delegation was on hand. With them was Student Body Vice President Eric Opaiella.
About 3 o'clock that afternoon, we had heard that they were putting together a memorial service in Reed Arena. We went to College Station that night for the memorial service. I don't know how to put this into words, but there was a lot of tough emotion that night in the arena. Every time I hear Amazing Grace, I think back to that night. I really do. I can't hear that song, or I can't even think about it without getting a little emotional about it. Because the way that it happened that night was, I think there was just a lull in the service, and I remember looking off to my right in Reed Arena, and it just kind of erupted. Somebody started humming it.
After returning to Austin, what Opaiella witnessed in College Station prompted him to craft a letter to Aggies everywhere.
I had the great privilege of attending the memorial service at A&M tonight and was deeply moved by the events I'd experienced. The A&M student body is truly one of the great treasures of our state. I learned something tonight. For all us Longhorns discount A&M in our never-ending rivalry, we need to realize one thing. Aggie land is a special place with special people. It's infinitely better equipped than us at dealing with a tragedy such as this for one simple reason. It is a family. It is a family that cares for its own, a family that reaches out, a family that's moved this Longhorn to tears. Texas A&M, the eyes of Texas are upon you, and they look with sincere sympathy upon a family that has been through so much tragedy this semester. Just reading it again for the first time, really in 10 years, the Aggie community is much more tight-knit, I believe, than the Longhorn community, and was before this this event. I think that's what enabled the Aggie community to get through this event. That was something that I think struck me that night that was not evident to me before.
The reaction to the letter was widespread and much appreciated by Aggies.
But I didn't intend for it to be taken to the extent it was taken. And I didn't expect the reaction that I think a lot of former students and current students at A&M had.
Even in the darkest of moments, the spirit of the Aggies could be seen.
Mr. President, I'll tell you one thing, the spirit of this school is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, what happened yesterday at that memorial service, when the whole school turned out, many people could get into that Reed Auditorium, no notice, nobody urging them to do it, simply to express their love and affection for their fellow students, and then determination to get on with life. I mean, this is a very special place with a very special hurt, but I think this community will recover very fast, strong.
This school, known for its tightly knit student body, flocked to the site, leaving awe-inspiring tributes behind that could still be viewed in the days after.
I don't think any of us realized how big the project was going to be. By the time it was all over, we had collected thousands and thousands of items off the fence and around the fence.
I just had this compelling feeling to go get some flowers. Of course, I got there, and of course the whole scene was roped off, and I couldn't get in there. And I noticed that I wasn't the first person with that idea.
To me, the Aggie rings mean more than anything else. We ended up with one that we took away from the site that went into our database. It was a man's ring from the class of '83 that had the name filed out of it. And that we found that ring the last day it had been tied to the crossbar of one of those crosses. No question what that ring represents.
With the decision to play the game, the football team worked through the heavy week, never with their minds far from what happened.
How do you go out and have a football practice, getting ready for a football game when you've got something of this magnitude going on? I was concerned about them just getting drained. And so that'd be the only thing that would keep us from playing up to our ability, would be to just be so worn down emotionally we couldn't play.
Well, I know it was a very, very difficult week for him, and because he not only was the head football coach, he is an Aggie, so he felt the same way as I did, or any former student did, about what happened and what a tragedy it was. And we certainly needed to have someone, and we're very fortunate to have someone that was in charge of our football team that understood what that bonfire meant.
When the decision was made that the game was going to be played, there was a level of focus unparalleled within the halls of the locker room. Guys were committed. They were completely focused on making sure that the performance in that game honored the people who died in that bonfire. That was it.
It was very challenging to stay focused on getting ready, and I felt more pressure in that game. I just, in my mind, could not imagine not winning that game. We had to win that game.
That week, concentration became more difficult by the fact that hordes of media descended on College Station. The event and its aftermath became worldwide news.
The town was descended upon by media from all over. The satellite trucks were everywhere. They were interviewing everyone, and it was something that was on this national stage and something that you had to deal with every day.
I mean, this was international news, and this campus was covered with people from all over the world in here doing stories, so you couldn't escape it. It was every radio you turned on, every television station. When we'd go to practice, there were cameras lined up.
Well, I had a friend that had flown to New York City and was in a cab. The cab driver just in passing said, "Where are you from?" And the guy said, "I'm from College Station." And he said, "Oh," he said, "that's Texas A&M, isn't it?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm really sorry about the loss of all those students." And this was a cab driver in New York City.
The throng of media, however, did not compare to the outpouring of support that came from so many across the country. But few displays surpassed those shown by the University of Texas. The Longhorns' tradition during A&M Week was to hold the Hex Rally. Annually, they gathered prior to playing the Aggies to put a hex on their old rivals. The tradition dates back to 1941. But after the fall of Bonfire, on the night designated the 1999 Hex Rally, Longhorns and Aggies stood united.
We turned that into a memorial service as well. And Will Hurd, who was the student body president at A&M at the time, and a group of student leaders there came to that, and we had a candlelight vigil that night that was in lieu of the Hex Rally. Probably 20,000 students that were at that.
The Hex Rally, which was amazing. I mean, all the A&M kids and fans and corps members that came over, the Texas fans and students were just unbelievable in the memorial, and it was very touching.
And I would say that from my perspective, the University of Texas could not have been more sensitive to the tragedy that we were going through.
My daughter and I were here and went to the tribute below the tower. It was a powerful display. I think it forever changed the relationship between Texas A&M and the University of Texas. They were powerful friends at a time our university needed to have a lot of friends.
As the week moved on, the gloom never faded, yet the game still approached. On the eve of the matchup, Texas A&M held a yell practice at Kyle Field. The Aggies had been doing this since the 30s, but never like the one Thanksgiving night of 1999. They came to pay respects to those 12 Aggies. They came to reflect. Earlier in the week, head yell leader Jeff Bailey was asked to address the crowd.
It was difficult. I remember the first instinct I had was to get away. So I took a couple days, I went home, then I got a little recorder. My mind was flooded with everything I was seeing since the day it happened. Just to feel the spirit, feel everything going on around the campus, the support, the pain. I wanted to capture all that, and so I carried that little recorder to document everything I saw, everything I felt, every thought I had come to my mind. The hardest part was that night, getting the overalls on, getting ready. I felt good about what I had on my recorder to say, but then I realized I better try to put this on paper, try to gather my thoughts, and I remember trying to write it all out and having my hand shake so hard I couldn't write. And that's when I immediately began to pray, and prayers are what got me out the door, and we grabbed the torches and led the band in, and walking into that environment and seeing the crowd was truly amazing.
Chip Teal, still recovering from severe wounds suffered in the collapse, was on hand.
The guys were pushing me in the wheelchair, and as we rolled through
that entrance over there, this whole place erupted. And I didn't realize there were going to be 50 or 60, I don't know how many thousand people were there. There were 50+ thousand people. You had Governor Bush, President Bush. It was amazing. And whenever the crowd took to their feet and started yelling and screaming and clapping for us, it was a feeling that's hard to describe.
Then it was time for Jeff Bailey to speak to the heartbroken 12th man.
I'm glad everybody's here safely tonight on this Thanksgiving evening. I've been thinking a lot today about Thanksgiving and all the things that we have to be thankful for. I was thinking of all the things that I'm thankful for: my faith, my family, my friends, and Texas A&M. When I think of Aggie Bonfire, I know what makes it so special. It's every single Aggie that stands around it. And there's a lot of Aggies standing here tonight. I think the one modification about this yell practice is that it's a yell practice of hope and a yell practice of strength. It's not about tradition. It's not about anything else. It's about standing here with your fellow man, your buddies, and yelling for Texas A&M and our team. But I've been thinking of two different things that we can draw a line to, and that's life, and that's the game. And life is by far more important than a game. And I want us all to remember that here tonight. And we have a challenge on all of us, both in life and at a game tomorrow. We have a challenge in each one of our lives to look for hope and strength and to move on and look at our future after a tough time and tragic week here at Texas A&M. And we'll never forget it. That will never be forgotten. This yell practice is not trying to forget anything. That will always be in our minds as long as the spirit lasts here at Texas A&M. But then I go to the game. I go to the game tomorrow morning, and that's another challenge. And I don't think we should connect those two, because as important as life is and more important than the game, I can tell you this: that game is an important part of every one of our lives. Winning that game tomorrow is an important part of our life.
After Bailey's words, the cannon fired 12 times in Kyle Field, now only lit by candle.
And I remember watching the memorial the night before with all the candles. And the kids went to the movie and I stayed there and watched. I couldn't help it.
Before the night ended, the football team paid one more tribute.
And then next thing you know, the whole team was running over, and Coach Slocum. And they didn't just come to see me, but they basically come to give a hug to all the coordinators, because the coordinators had just been through hell that week. There's another one of those deals. It's just the little things that people do throughout your life, looking back, that mean a whole heck of a lot.
1 week had passed since the collapse of the bonfire. One game was now ready to be played the following morning. On the day after Thanksgiving, Texas A&M was set to play Texas for the 106th time. Always the biggest of games in this football-mad state, no previous contest between the rivals would match the emotion of the one that lie ahead.
It was more, I would almost say, a grim determination. You know, there was a somber attitude among the team, among the players in the locker room. All the way up to the kickoff, I was concerned about them just being worn down so much mentally that they may have trouble focusing on the field.
The locker room prior to the Texas game was very much unlike a typical pregame locker room. The locker room for the Texas game after Bonfire was confident but somber. I remember specifically Andy Vincent, one of my great buddies in college, offensive lineman. He came in and together we both wrote the names of all the victims on our t-shirts. And I remember some other guys started to do the same thing. And it was just symbolic of this game is not for us, it's for them.
Before kickoff, moving tributes were paid, while one of the loudest stadiums in football went silent.
The wind was blowing that day. All you can hear are those flags blowing in the breeze, and then you can actually hear those birds and their wings flapping as they let them out. I'll never forget that as long as I live.
It was almost like the MSC got moved a few yards to the south. Kyle Field became the memorial to those 12 fallen Aggies.
And there's F-16s coming over. I remember that one taking off, you know, for the missing individual. And by the time the kickoff came, there probably wasn't a dry eye in the house.
On this day, the Aggies, 7-3 entering the game, faced a daunting task. Not only were they carrying the weight of a trying week with them, but fifth-ranked Texas had started to dominate late in the year. With the largest crowd ever to watch a football game in the state of Texas filing in, many wondered, was it too much to ask of the Aggies?
I'll flip it in the air. You call it in the air. If I fail to catch it, we'll do it over. You call tails. It's heads. We'll defer.
As the first half unfolded, it looked as if that was the case. Texas A&M did score first, but the Longhorns quickly flexed their muscle, scoring 2 touchdowns in the second quarter, establishing a 16-6 halftime lead. When the two rivals hit their respective locker rooms for the intermission, it looked as if it was indeed all too much, and the Aggies would have just 30 minutes remaining to reverse their fortunes. At halftime, the two schools' bands took the field to pay their respects. What those in attendance saw would not soon be forgotten.
When they did the Amazing Grace, I think it touched everybody. It touched the nation that saw it, it touched everybody in the stands.
I'll never forget the wonderful rendition of Amazing Grace that great band played on that field that day. That day, there were Aggies and Longhorns celebrating human life and our hope for something better. But I will never forget the flags that the Longhorn band carries, and all those flags were lowered with the exception of the 2 Texas A&M flags. And then the Aggie band did their thing, very traditional drill. And at the end, we did, in our way, a tribute. And the block T was formed in its traditional fashion, and to drum clicks, the Aggie band simply walked off the field.
I went down to the third deck and was out in the crowd so I could just kind of hear the reaction and see folks' faces when all this was going on, the halftime performances and the silent T formation. It was absolutely quiet. It was a halftime I'll never forget at Kyle Field.
They grieved with us during that time. And here I was, just a Longhorn hater because I'd played against them, you know, wanted to beat them any way I could beat them. I'm thinking, that is incredible, that that kind of unity could come about over this event, but it did.
We came out at halftime, came running out, and I've done that hundreds of times over the years, and it's a great feeling to run back out there in the crowd. We came on the field, and I tell you, there was a stadium full of close to 90,000 people, and it was silent. But it was such an eerie thing to run out on that field. There's probably never before or since been a football stadium that was that many people in it that was that quiet.
The silence did not last long as the Aggies roared back in the second half.
McCowan drops back, lofts one, goes sideline. Bethel Johnson caught it, and he goes out of bounds inside the Texas 20.
Good 30-yard gain, and you can't say enough about the throw from Randy McCowan. It had to be perfect, and it was.
It seemed like there was never really like things got tense, like, you know, we're running out of time, we got to hurry up and do something. That never was the case.
Third down and about 2, high formation. There's the snap, there's the handoff, it goes to Toombs. He's going to score a touchdown, he got in. He stiff-armed a man about the 10-yard line.
He saw it open up outside, nice move with the stiff arm, helped him move it outside, untouched to the pylon.
The Aggies now have cut the Texas lead to 3, 16-13 with 4:47 remaining of the third quarter.
Coach Hankiewicz made a decision that we were going to bring some pressure, and we were going to try to force the issue.
Play action, drops back, steps up. He's going to be sacked back across the 45 at the Texas 44-yard line. They'll run this play from a shotgun on 2nd and 15. Ags are coming. They're going to throw a screen, and it's almost intercepted.
Back and forth, the two teams win. The Aggies refused to yield to the heavily favored Longhorns. This team had weapons of their own, one of which was an All-American punter in Shane Leckler. He continually pinned Texas deep in their own territory.
4th down and 10. Good snap, and there is nothing. And here's the punt, and it's a dandy. Has a chance to be killed inside the 5, and it is. It's Webster, caught it on a hop at the 3-yard line.
This once eerily silent stadium was now starting to shake with every step the Aggies made towards a comeback. The players sensed it.
I remember the feeling of just almost knowing like we're not going to lose this game. You know, I don't know how we're going to win it, but we're not going to lose it.
With Randy McCowan at the controls, the Aggies gained possession after a UT punt at the Longhorn 48. Field position had become ever so important. And with 8 minutes and 30 seconds left, trailing by 3, the Aggies marched towards the end zone.
At the line on 4th and short. Snapped it, goes to Toombs, dives for the first down. McCowan under center. Drops back, going far sideline, trying to run under and caught. He is inside the 15. He is out of bounds at the Texas 13-yard line.
Randy had just hit Chris Cole on a fade when we were on the 14-yard line.
The Texas 14 want to throw again, going down into the end zone. It's Baumgartner. It's a touchdown.
I lost the ball for like half the time because it went up into the shadows. And I'm like, goodness gracious, things can hit me in the face mask.
Looking back into the sun, Baumgartner able to locate the ball. The ball a little bit underthrown, so Baumgartner can come back in front of the defender and bring down the football for the touchdown that puts the Aggies ahead.
After Matt Bumgardner's touchdown catch, the Aggies led 20-16 with a little more than 5 minutes remaining. The Aggies forced a Texas punt on the ensuing possession, but were unable to run out the clock offensively. Leckler then worked his magic again. His final punt of the game was downed at the UT 11-yard line with 1 minute and 52 seconds to go. The Aggies needed one more stop. They had been here before.
The year before, when we were up at their place, and they had the same kind of 2-minute, last-minute situation of driving the ball down the field and scoring. We were in a lot of zone defense trying to cover as opposed to getting pressure and trying to force the issue.
This time around, the same quarterback, Major Applewhite, moved Texas into A&M territory. Then the Aggies dug deep.
We had put in a special blitz that weekend, and I believe we called it Bevo, if I'm not mistaken. And when we lined up, we knew, hey, we're coming.
2 wides each side, and they're coming up the middle. He's been stripped of the ball.
And I remember Jay came off the edge, and as I engaged the back, here comes Jay at the same time. And I made it around the back, and he made a good hit on Major, which caused the fumble, and I can just remember seeing as he hit, the ball drop.
Who got it? I think Texas got it back.
It was one of those situations that I was like, man, I'm not letting go of this football. It's not getting away from me. And I just held on for dear life.
Aggies got the ball! Aggies got the ball! 23 seconds to go, A&M got it!
Gamble's recovery sealed the win. When he raised his arms to the heavens, Aggies finally had a reason to exhale and rejoice.
That Brian Gamble kid, that freshman, recovered that fumble with a few seconds left, holding that ball up. That was more than symbolic in terms of what that victory meant to this university, and I think to people around the world who knew that in that great tragedy there was some moment of triumph in that process.
That was the way the story was supposed to end, with us, capping the game and then seeing him down there on his knees, looking up to the sky. It was almost like he was looking at those 12 fallen Aggies at Bonfire and said, "This is for you guys. We did this for you."
All that tragedy, and then all of a sudden, just complete jubilation. And it's really special. Like I said, at the time, you're a young kid. You're just trying to win ball games. You know it's a big play. But yeah, once you get a little older and down the road, it really hits home.
It was not so much what we gained, it was what we would have lost had we lost the game. But had we lost, I think our hearts were just so heavy, and we'd gone through just an agonizing day after day after day. I don't know if we could have taken any more disappointment. Losing was not an acceptable outcome of that game as far as I was concerned.
I have no idea what we gained by winning that game. And I don't know if winning that game or losing that game ultimately mattered. But it was certainly symbolic. Certainly symbolic of a university, a student body, a collection of former students all over the world to represent that true spirit that we have at Texas A&M. The Aggies never quit. And we come together in the face of adversity, no matter what that adversity is. It's not just spoken about here. It's lived, it's practiced, and it's represented in a way that you can't understand unless you're part of it.
It helped the kids, it helped our football players, I think it helped the student body because it's a symbol that, that we overcame a tragedy, and I think it probably, I think it probably helped all of it.
What you did out there today is special. That's a special effort by a bunch of guys to go through this past week and to put in the work and do what you did and to go out there and to hang in there in that ball game and find a way to win. I couldn't be more proud of you. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people out there that couldn't be more proud of you.
No one would have held it against them after what this university had been through that week. If they had not won against a powerful UT team that had come in here with number 5 in the nation, but when they did, it seemed so right that the Aggies had won the game.
I was part of of the crowd that went straight from Kyle Field, walked across campus, and went to the bonfire site. And hundreds of people left their ticket stubs. That pilgrimage, winning the football game, leaving Kyle Field, walking across campus, and leaving not only ticket stubs, but drink cups, 12th man towels, Aggie caps, t-shirts after the game. And then people left those things behind.
And that was a day that we needed that. The human spirit pulled it out for each one of those young men that played that day and for each of us that were in attendance at that game. That was the best football game I've ever been to in 32 years.
I really don't feel like that God cares who wins football games, unless I talk about that game. I think He cared. We needed to win that game. Aggie family needed it.
It was a divine intervention, I like to say so. The team, you're right, they played above what was expected, and I will always look back on that game as probably the greatest game in Aggie history.
In 2004, Texas A&M completed the Aggie Bonfire Memorial on the site of the 1999 collapse. The focal point is the Spirit Ring, where 12 portals commemorate the fallen, each one pointing toward their hometown. Leading up to it is the History Walk. 89 granite blocks represent each year the bonfire burned. The memorial allows visitors to reflect and remember as it sits quietly in the heart of a bustling university campus.
I think it's a fitting memorial, I really do. It's unique in its design and the way the directions that the doorways point and the symbology there to their hometowns and other things. And then the spot where the center pole was located. I'm pleased we honored those students. I remember reading about those students, and it read like a who's who of the best young men and women in America.
Well, I think it made the Aggie family stronger. I think it made this whole community stronger. I mean, we just, you had a terrible tragedy there. You just, in situations like that, just pray for understanding and to move forward.
The true Aggie spirit showed from 3 o'clock in the morning on November 18th. That was a defining moment because it showed what Aggies could do when Aggies were in need.
It was Aggies being Aggies. It was Aggies taking care of each other. It was the buddy system at play. It was a great reflection of what the Aggie spirit's really all about.
A&M is such a great system. It's such a great place to go and really learn about life, real life, and values, and what being a family and what being a friend is truly about. And that was definitely what those 8 days revealed about Texas A&M.
It was Judgment Day in Aggie land, and tenseness filled the air. All knew there was a trip at hand, but not a soul knew where. Assembled on the drill field was a world-renowned 12th man, the entire Fighting Aggie team, and the famous Aggie band. And out in front, with Royal Guard, the reviewing party stood. St. Peter and his angel staff were choosing bad from good. First he surveyed the Aggie team, and in terms of an angel swore, "By Jove, I do believe I've seen this gallant group before. I've seen them play since way back when, and they've always had the grit. I've seen them lose, I've seen them win, but I've never seen them quit. No need for us to tarry here, deciding upon their fates. 'Tis as plain as the halo on my head. that they've opened heaven's gates. And when the 12th man heard this, they let out a mighty yell. That echoed clear to heaven and shook the gates of hell. And what group is this upon the side? St. Peter asked his aid, but swelled as if to burst with pride when we our judgment made. Why, sir, that's the Cadet Corps. It's known both far and wide for backing up their fighting team, whether they won, lost, or tied. Well then, said St. Peter, it's very plain to me that within the realms of heaven, they should spend eternity. And have the Texas Aggie Band at once commenced to play. For their fates too, we must decide upon this crucial day. And the drum major, so hearing, slowly raised his hand and said, boys, let's play the Spirit for the last time in Aggie land. And the band poured forth the anthem, and notes both bright and clear. And 10,000 Aggie voices sung the song they hold so dear. And when the band had finished, St. Peter wiped his eyes and said, it's not so hard to see. They're meant for paradise. And the colonel of the Cadet Corps said as he stiffly took a stand, it's just another corps trip, boys. We'll march in behind the band.